All right, we're back in the book of Revelation this evening. Recall, we've just seen a great big battle. Wasn't much of a battle though, because it was over in an instant. And let's go back to chapter 19 and look at the last 4 verses, or 3 verses. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken. Now what's that mean? Captured. In the old days, that was your purpose, to capture the leader, and then you kill him and the army's going to quit. So the beast was taken, and with him who? All right, there's the 2 ringleaders of the tribulation period. The beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist. So those are the 2 that are captured. Now what do they do with them? Well, that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast out. Now underline that, if you don't have it underlined, were cast alive. They weren't slain on the battlefield. Nope. They were taken, it says, and cast alive into a lake of what? Fire, burning with brimstone. All right? Now, you take fire and you put sulfur in it, and what happens? Burns 10 times hotter. That's like striking a match. When you strike that match, how it flames up, that's that sulfur in that match that makes it flame up. And that's what makes a fire hotter, is sulfur. So notice God has made this fire extra hot. Now notice what happens. It says they're cast alive into the lake of fire and brimstone. So that means they're not destroyed when they're cast in. They're still alive. And we'll see over in chapter 20, they're still alive when the devil gets chunked in to the lake of fire. All right? Now, the rest of the story of the battle. Verse 21. And the remnant, that's all the kings, the generals, all of the armies, the privates, the captains, the lance corporals, the sergeants, everybody that's left in that army that is opposing Christ and his army, the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth. All right? What's that mean? Now, that doesn't mean literally Christ has a tongue that's like a sword, but what that implies is what? Right, the spoken word, speaking. Well, now, if you go back to Genesis 1:1, what did it take to form this whole universe? Right? God said, let it be, and so it was. It was. When God says something, it is. It was, it shall be. So, the Lord speaks, and instantly that whole valley of Armageddon is filled to the horse's bridle with the blood of this army. There's a lot in this army. There's 10 armies, technically, that have joined together to form one big army following the Antichrist, the 10 kings and their armies. So they're following the Antichrist, and they come into that valley of Armageddon, and I don't know that they don't get about halfway, and that's where we meet. And then, boom, instant annihilation. Now think of this. Those that have opposed Christ, those that were persecuting his saints, those who were martyring his saints during the tribulation period, they're going to be slain instantly. Okay, for all of their wickedness, God's going to avenge the blood of his saints on them. Now, here's something to think about. The Antichrist and the false prophet are where? Lake of fire. So where will these be that are in the army? When they die, what happens to them? When they're slain, what happens? Right. What happens to any soul that dies in sin? That's exactly right. These 10 armies and their kings and all of the leaders that are in that army are cast into hell. they die in their sins. That's still the formula. They go to hell. You die lost, you die, you go to hell. All right? So, now, the whole army of all these 10 kings, the whole leadership, everybody's gone now. They're all gone. And I like this next part because chapter 20 gives us something that we should be shouting about. And I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Now look at that. This angel's coming to do some business, isn't he? He's got a key to a bottomless pit. And he's got a great chain. Now what do you use a chain for? Right. To bind something. Okay? To tie it together. And he laid hold on the dragon. Now, if you're doubting who the dragon is, hang on, it'll explain it for you. Hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is who? And Satan. And bound him how long? Now, it's a specific term, a specific sentence on the devil for 1,000 years. He's going to be chained and put in a bottomless pit. Verse 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him. All right? Now that seal means nobody can break that seal. That angel has specific power over the devil, a specific mission over the devil, to lock him up in chains, to put him in a bottomless pit, to lock that bottomless pit up and put a seal on that lock. Which means God has this seal here and ain't nobody going to break it for 1,000 years. It says, look at this, but there's something else that we need to look here. It says, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him. Now notice this, that he should deceive the nations what? The devil's going to be shut up. Till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And notice this statement, and after that, he must be loosed. How long? All right. Now, what this tells us is the first thing of business for the millennial age is old Slewfoot has to be locked up. The devil, who is our number one adversary, is going to be locked up. We don't have to worry about him anyway. We're already in eternity. We already have our eternal bodies, our glorified bodies. We're with Christ. We don't have to worry about the devil, but those that are alive and remain on the earth, sooner or later, they're going to have to worry about him. But he's getting locked up. Can you imagine how peaceful that is? The devils can't influence anybody. But look at the opposite side of that coin. Even though the devil can't influence you, he can't tempt you, he can't entice you, man still in his depravity is still going to rebel against Jesus. How do we know that? Well, write Psalms 2 in your margin there if you don't have it. Psalm 2. This is known as the Messianic Psalm. Get back there. Psalm 2. Look what it says. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. So what are they conspiring to do? Overthrow the Lord in his throne in the millennial period. So what this tells us is that even without the devil's influence, what will man choose to do? Follow the devil, even though the devil ain't even there. They're going to follow after him. Why? That goes back to what we were talking about this morning. When Adam and Eve fell in the Garden of Eden, they just didn't fall part way. They fell the whole way, and their nature is corrupted. Okay? And I like to use that illustration of possum juice. Everybody remember that illustration? My possum juice is gone, so I'm gonna have to get me some more. But for Wanda and Rose, they don't know my possum illustration too much. You go down to the highway about July, and you'll see one of them possums down there all swelled up on the road, laying on his back, just about ready to pop. Well, you take that possum and squeeze him, and squeeze that juice that's going to come out of him into your water bottle. Now, how many will drink that water bottle? Anybody? Why? It's corrupted. Not all of it is corrupted. Yes, it is. It's all corrupted. Why? Because all it took was one drop of that rotten possum juice to spoil the whole thing. One sin spoiled our natures and made us corrupt. Now think about this. Here, men have Christ setting up the millennial kingdom, verse 4 on down to verse number 6. The millennial kingdom is set up, and what do men want to do? First thing is overthrow Christ. They conspire against him. But remember over there in chapter number 19 and verse 15, he shall rule them with a rod of iron. He's not taking any slack. He's not going to give them any slack. He's going to make them toe the line. So as you look at this and you understand this, look what's happening now. Here's Christ set up a throne, ruling and reigning literally for 1,000 years. The devil's locked up. The Antichrist and the false prophet are locked up in the lake of fire. The devil's locked up in the pit. Man, can you imagine how nice that'll be without those evil influences around? But think about it. It's not just them. It's that corrupt man, that lost man, that still wants to rebel against God. That's the peak of depravity when they have Jesus right in front of them. And they can hear him. They can see him. They can talk to him. They can have conversation with him and know he's real, yet what do they want to do? Oh, we don't want you to rule over us. That's like what they told Samuel, remember? God says they're not rebelling against you, they're rebelling against me. That's why it says back here in Psalms 2, in the next verse it says, he that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh them into derision. So think about that. Here now is the setting of the stage for 1,000-year period of grace, or the millennial age. And for 1,000 years, Christ and us will rule and reign on this earth, and we will have a blessed time on this earth. The earth will heal itself shortly. For a little while, the earth will heal itself. And it'll be kind of like Eden all over again on this earth for that 1,000 years. But Christ is going to rule and reign. Verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ how long? So the martyrs is mentioned here in particular as ruling and reigning with Christ as well. Now, of course, his bride's going to be there. He's the bridegroom, we're the bride. And not only will we be there, so will the martyrs, those who have died during this time of tribulation. Now, can you imagine how they're going to feel coming back to this earth in their glorified state, ruling and reigning, and able to see a beautiful earth, a beautiful place for the time being, and getting to rule over those who had caused them so much grief? Now, of course, the leadership is gone, the armies are gone, but those people are still alive, and they're still conspiring to go against Christ. But Christ knows that. Christ will prevent that. Christ will control them with that rod of iron. Now, look what else it says, verse 5. But the rest of the dead live not again until what? This is the first resurrection. Okay, for 1,000 years then, there's going to be peace and quiet. But there's going to be a final resurrection. That resurrection unto judgment. But look at this. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. All right? So you don't want to be in that second resurrection, do you? What's the second resurrection for? Right? Verse 11. That's for those that are in that second resurrection, or the second death, they call that. So here we now have the resurrection it speaks of, and how that those that have been martyred are allowed to be resurrected for the very purpose of ruling over those who were persecuting them, who were murdering them. Now remember, the kings are gone, the generals are gone, all of the army's gone, but there are still rulers all over the land that set all that up. All the people that are left on the planet are trying to figure out a way to get around this. But the Lord's not going to put up with it, is he? What does that ruling with a rod of iron mean? No slack. He's going to say, you come and bring your gifts. They don't come, what happens? Crops go bad. Cattle die. Locusts come and eat everything. Disease, plagues, all those things will come upon those who refuse to cooperate with Christ. And they'll know. They'll know that they have to go and bow before Christ, and they don't like it. That's the rub. That's what you think about. Here's Christ now. They can actually hear him and see him, like I said earlier, if they don't want to do it. That's that fallen nature in us. The devil's not around. The false prophet's not around. The Antichrist or the beast is not around. So why do men still want to overthrow Christ? Because of that nature. They're rebels in their nature. They're corrupt in their nature, and they don't want anybody ruling over them, especially God. We look at that this morning, forsaking God. And that's exactly what this shows us, is how that the nations have forsaken God and have turned themselves over to the Antichrist and his kingdom whole hog and loving it. The merchants were getting rich, remember? And all those people were getting rich off of this kingdom of the Antichrist. They were all profiting, except for the people that trusted in the Lord. Now the shoe's on the other foot. Now they get to rule over them, and they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it at all. So this period of time, for this 1,000 literal years, is known as the millennium. And that's what millennium means, 1,000. 1,000 literal years. And we'll take up with the rest of the story, starting in verse 7, down to verse 10, and see what happens next. Because there's going to be one more final battle. Okay, we've had the Battle of Armageddon, but there's one more battle, and that battle is called Gog and Magog. That's the name of the nations that are left, Gog and Magog. And they're going to come together and surround the army, surround us there at Jerusalem that are camped outside the city. And they're going to encompass the breadth of the earth. That's a big army. And they're going to say, oh, we're going to kill them graveyard dead. Got news. They're going to be barbecued. They're going to be barbecued real quick like. So here now is the setting of the stage. The millennium, if you think about it, here's for 7 years, there's been nothing but murder and torment, torture. But for 1,000 years, it's going to be perfect peace, ruled and reigned by Christ and his representatives. For 1,000 years now, it's going to be a beautiful time on earth. Yet, here's man, still wanting to rebel, still wanting to go against God, and still behind the scenes whispering, conspiring, imagining a vain thing like it says there in Psalm 2. So as we look at that, you think about that. How in the world do they do that? They can hear Christ, they can see him, they can touch him, but they won't repent. They won't believe in him. They won't accept him. Just as he came the first time, they wouldn't accept him. They still won't accept him, but he's still the Messiah. He's still the King of Kings. He's still the Lord of Lords. Even though they reject him outright, he's still in control, and they refuse to admit that. He's going to show them who's in control shortly thereafter. So go ahead and read ahead to from verse 7 to verse 10, and we'll look at that next time, Lord willing. You'll see the devil gets loose. It's not an escape. He's loosened on purpose by God. So think about that. All right, study that out. Next time, Lord willing, we'll pick up with verse 7. All right, let's all stand.